city. So good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
Sorry if I kept you waiting.
No.
I come a long way, and Bangalore is notorious for its distances. So I cannot express how thrilled and how nervous I am to be here with you this morning. A WeSchool audience is the most challenging of audiences. You are from the world of clear-cut problems, linear logic, and neat solutions. I belong to the world of wicked problems, clumsy methods, and messy solutions. The making and implementation of public policy for a country as large, as populous, and as diverse as India is intrinsically a more complex task than in a smaller political unit. So, I thought quite a bit about how to present this topic to you, complex as it is. For every hypothesis that we may construct on Indian public policy making, the reverse would also be true. Finally, I decided to speak from my vantage point as an officer of the Indian Administrative Service with 35 years work experience in the civil service of India. So, it will be a personalized, worm's eye view that I will be presenting from my own experience rather than a researcher's macro level bird's eye view. Therefore, to set the agenda for today, I will start with a brief introduction of my career trajectory and my journey from being a conventional civil servant to a reflective practitioner. As I grew in my career, India's political economy changed and transformed around me, and this is the terrain that we shall traverse together. I will then brief you on the IAS itself, the Indian Administrative Service, as the understanding about the service is rather vague and general, especially with an overseas audience. I will give you specific instances on the joys and thrills, as well as the travails and predicaments of being in the IAS. We will then move to the challenges in public policy making and implementation in India, and then close with a few takeaways. You are a group that is imbibing creative leadership. If your country has got under your skin, as India has got under mine, if your country pushes your buttons, as India does mine, if our countrymen and countrywomen are simultaneously endearing, bewildering, infuriating to you as to me, then join me in this long, blessed, baffling journey that I have traveled for the past 35 years. I began my professional life as a practitioner, there down below. That is me, at the beginning of the service, specifically the Indian Administrative Service, which I entered by serendipity rather than deliberation. In the old days, that is, the pre-LPG, the pre-liberalization, privatization, globalization days, opportunities for youth were few, and for women even fewer, because the economic landscape of India was narrow. The IAS offered a dignified, even prestigious prodigious means to earn a livelihood, and that is the way I entered the service. For the first 15 years or so, I spent life as a conventional bureaucrat, closing files, opening files, signing files, working for government. Any of you has worked for government at any time? Okay. So this is an eye-opener. Working for government means that you have a lot of time on your hands to ponder on the great questions of life. For instance, should I open this file? Or should I close this file? Or that all-important puzzle that no one has succeeded in cracking as yet, should I actually sign this file? What I did not realize at that time was that I was spending and living life in a chrysalis, as it were. I was soaking up experience, observing, acting, doing, and I was internalizing everything that was around me. Gradually, the questions became louder. Life became more than livelihood. The stark inequality, the poverty, the indifference of some to the suffering of the other, and the massive unfairness of it all was something that penetrated even my very thick bureaucratic brain. And that was when I stepped back. From 2002 to 2013, I tried to make sense of it all as a scholar of public policy and governance. My search for answers led me to the portals of the Indian-Institute of Management, Bangalore, another B school, one of the premier B schools of India, first as a master's student in 2002 and then as a doctoral scholar in 2007. So, when I joined the PhD program, I already was familiar with the institute and they with me. More importantly, what I brought to the table was almost 2 decades of experience in the real world. And it can't get more real than the Indian Administrative Service. So, the sense of what is workable and realistic always informs my research. It is at times a nuisance too, a limiting factor that curbs my academic enthusiasm. I was also significantly older. I was in my 40s when I entered IIM, took the sabbatical. And in fact, my first discovery was that many of my classmates, all of my classmates, were younger than me. They were the age of my children actually. Then I realized that some faculty were younger than me. And the final discovery was that even some disciplines were younger than me. But my years in IIM Bangalore transformed my perspective, training me to integrate my worm's eye view as a practitioner with the bird's eye view of a policy analyst. They were also among the happiest in my life, for my cynicism as a bureaucrat came to be tempered with hope and cheer as I began to interact with youth who were my fellow scholars, but also the future of my country. Since completing my research, I moved back to government, but I continued my research and academic interests. As I returned from my sabbatical back into service, transformed, I now wear many hats: a scholar, a practitioner, a learner, a volunteer, and a speaker. What I strive to be is to be a composite public policy professional in the most complete sense of the word. As I grew and matured in the way I have narrated to you, around me I saw the world change and my domain changed apace. I have seen the nature of leadership and the public demand on leaders change and evolve in the course of my 35-year career. When I entered service into government, the IAS officer was something of a Wild West cowboy or cowgirl, a lone ranger, shouldering the burdens and solving the problems of her or his territory. But by 1987, the year when I entered service, Karnataka introduced, the state you are in is Karnataka. Karnataka introduced the Panchayati Raj legislation, which is local level decentralization. And this was followed by the 73rd and 74th constitutional amendment nationwide, which devolved many political and financial powers to local bodies, both rural and urban. This meant that officers like me had to learn to work in a decentralized, devolved political structure at the local level, and power was shared at the local level with elected Jilla meaning district, Taluka is a smaller revenue unit, and Gram meaning village, Panchayat is the local body members. So we had to learn to share power at many levels. I was a young officer in Dharwad district, which is in the northern part of Karnataka, and I recall loud arguments and pitched battles between officers and politicians as to the best course of implementing programs. The politicians had a different idea, we had a different idea. Officers insisted on procedure, politicians wanted everything to be done day before yesterday, loud arguments. And not just the IAS, the state level political leadership had to learn to share power as well. If we talk of disruption, and it is a very fashionable word today in management, if we talk of disruption, the Panchayati Raj local level decentralization experiment was one of the greatest disruptions in my country's history. The next major change happened in the early 1990s. In 1991, we had what is called the balance of payments crisis. We were too indebted. We had to make structural adjustments and economic reforms mandated by the World Bank and IMF because we had grown too indebted. This ushered in a new era of economic reform. And in terms of the IAS and government in general, the single biggest adjustment was the curtailing of the powers of government and the end of the license permit Raj. Earlier, everything you wanted to do, you had to take a license for it. That was done away with. You had to seek permissions. Many of them were done away with. We were not able to do that completely, but it ushered in this new era of liberalization. Okay? This did not mean that the leadership role of the bureaucracy ended. Rather, it demanded mid-course operational correction and adaptation. Suddenly, common sense leadership, which is what we used to do. We used to work in our areas and we used to solve the problems there. That kind of common sense leadership was no longer enough. Now, the bureaucrat had to learn to navigate complex contracts and learn new managerial skills to steer networks and horizontal government. A few months ago, I organized a conference of political and bureaucratic leaders of southern India. For the logistics alone, I had to transact with the Interstate Council of the Government of India for the delegate list, the protocol department of my state for proper reception of the delegates, the local district collectors, hotels in Bangalore for accommodation, handicrafts department for giving gifts to the delegates, tourism department for field visits, to name only a few. None of these were under my direct authority. I had to network with different departments within and outside the government for the very simple task of conducting a conference. So I could not use, and the bureaucrats could no longer use the hierarchical structure of government, not use authority, but had to fall back on negotiation, persuasion, problem solving. A collaborative form of leadership was what was required. Today, a combination of technological possibility and an aspirational society has resulted in even more demands on the Indian bureaucrat and politician. Why should I wait in a queue to pay my electricity bills? Let the system provide the facility online. I want to purchase land in Bangalore, but I reside in San Francisco. Can I get my land registered without having to travel? These were questions which the public began to ask us. Today, e-governance innovations are enabling such transformations and transactions. So,